Welcome to Meet the Moment podcast produced by the Real Estate Business Institute. This podcast is an exploration of what today's industry leaders and agents need to know to be profitable, productive, and have fun. I'm Matthew Rathman, and I'm joined by co-host Kimberly Allard as we chat with thought leaders, brokers, and agents who can help agents meet the moment of change in the real estate industry. All right. Hello, everybody. This is Matthew, and I'm with the awesome Kimberly Allard, my co-host here at Meeting the Moment. And we have a special guest with Rick Harris today, who is the master of all things MLS. And we are going to have a great conversation about the MLS. What is it now? What is it going to be in the future? Some things we should think about. And Kimberly, what are you hearing out there as an instructor traveling around about MLS, especially in the wake of the NAR settlement and other things?
Well, first of all, hello there, Matthew. It's always fun to spend some time with you, and especially with our guest today. What am I hearing? Boy, what am I not hearing? I think a lot of opinions, not a whole lot of facts, and it's interesting to see what folks are or how they are describing an MLS, what they think it is, what they don't think it is, what they're forgetting it actually is, and the consequences of losing a very valuable database of information that not only real estate agents benefit from, but we can draw a direct line to how we use this tool to benefit our clients and essentially maintain this open marketplace. So it's an interesting discussion. I'm hearing a lot.
It is. And we get the privilege through Dynamic Directions and our partnership there and through REBI and Real Estate Business Institute to get to hear from Rick a lot. So I'm excited for our audience to be able to hear from today. Rick Harris is our guest today. He's a principal broker in Ashland, Oregon. He's also in the top 1% of producers in his franchise, which means he's rich. He's been an agent for over 35 years and a national instructor and faculty at Dynamic Directions. He's a powerhouse volunteer in the industry and the MLS leadership especially. And he served almost every level. He's been a national director. He was a regional vice president, a FPC for Senator Jeff Merkley, a chair for NAR's MLS Issues Committee, and most recently a member of the NAR Executive Committee and Cultural Transformation Commission. Basically, if it's something to do in the industry, he's probably done it, and we always get to hear his wisdom. And, he never seems tired of this. Rick, are you ever tired of just being the Superman for MLS and leadership?
Matthew, I almost fell asleep when you were reading my resume there. I'm so tired.
Well, you've been in a lot of rooms and you've managed to stay awake. So hopefully we can keep you awake here.
Well, and I appreciate that. No, I don't get tired because I do this because I love it. I love it for a couple of reasons. Real estate changed my life, probably changed your lives too. Yeah. And to me, that fact that I had the opportunity to do something that was life-changing for me, I want to keep that opportunity available for others who want to do the same thing. And not only for people who want to be in the real estate business, but those who get to enjoy the benefits of being able to own and use and transfer real property. That's a fundamental piece to me. And it's worth volunteering my time for, and which is why I do it. So I'm not tired, but I am. I do burn the candle at all of the ends that there are.
Well, I think there's a lot more to that, Rick, than you're letting on. So if you wouldn't mind, again, I'm going to just echo what Matthew said. You are very well known on many levels, but especially in the MLS world. Tell us a little bit about how you got there. What does your journey look like?
So I was thinking about this question last night, and I remember when I was a brand new baby realtor, I was probably in the business for 4 months. And at that point, 1989, MLS had a book. It had just at the very beginnings of starting to computerize. And it also acted kind of as a flyer distribution system. So I had all these flyers about my property, and I'd take them to MLS, and they'd put them in every broker's box. And one day I was looking at something that I wanted to advertise, and the MLS committee said, "You can't do that." And so I got myself a meeting in front of the brokers of the MLS committee. And said what my piece was about my little flyer I wanted to distribute to all the agents because I was a hot young agent. And I was basically shut down by the brokers. They're saying, little boy, you don't know what you're talking about. Please leave. And of course, the best way to get me to do something is to tell me I cannot or I may not. And so I began my MLS journey right at the bat, challenging the idea that it had to be the way it had always been. And so very early in my own office, I created a computerized version of the MLS where we got 5 null modem computer bases with a standard single server in my office, and began the process of turning what was a collection of old, stale black and white data into something usable. And then throughout time, I volunteered at my local level on the MLS and then as the MLS president. And I always said this, that the thing about MLS that was so important to me was it touched every single agent and broker every single day. And that if I wanted to make a difference in moving the industry forward, I had to work on something that people engaged in. And you've all heard this, and we've all heard this, that the vast majority of people think that the MLS is the whole meal deal. They don't really get a lot of sense out of the value of associations and so on. And so I volunteered on the MLS side right from the beginning, and then all the way through some of the major decisions that have been made. I was on a PAG, Presidential Advisory Group for NAR, when we decided we would give an internet data exchange feed to franchisors instead of brokers. Well, you'd have thought the world was going to end. Even though we told everybody about it multiple times, once that rule passed at NAR, we were threatened with a lawsuit. We were then had a PAG to try to correct that and got it corrected. I was there for the 2013 claim by Craig Cheatham, who at that point working for brokers, saying, if you don't fix this problem in 10 days, we're going to do something different, which was initially the launch of Broker Public Portal. Sat in the meetings that dealt with IDX rules and VOW, worked on clear cooperation. Oh my God, the worst in the world. But the bottom line about the whole of MLS to me is that it really was that tool that allowed agents to be able to serve their clientele well. And so that's what's been important to me about serving. And I've been on numerous commissions and PAGs and CMLS and working with Variety. I do strategic planning all over the country for MLSs. So I've been cheek to jowl in the real estate decision making about MLSs.
And I could actually just just listen to you for the next 55 minutes and not say another word. But, I feel like our listeners might be jumping in at a different level, Rick, than you're explaining. We probably should back the bus up a little bit and talk about the fact that essentially an MLS is a database of homes available for sale. And we'll talk about the benefits of that throughout our discussion, but also that an MLS, a multiple listing service, can be owned and managed and run by a Realtor association, which obviously is our trade association, or it may not be. And we've got a variety of different MLS models across the country. So I'm guessing, the discussions here will include all different models and how they differ. And, and then obviously what we're looking at going forward for that tool. But for our listeners, there are a number of iterations of MLSs, we should say.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Kimberly, because it's easy to jump in at I've got this much background, and so if you're not up to speed with me, you don't know where you are. But let's get at what MLS really is. It's not really just a database. It's really an agreement between brokerages. And when MLS started, Matthew had a listing, Kimberly, you had a buyer, and you weren't talking to each other. And then one day at lunch, Matthew says to you, hey, Kimberly, I have this property for sale. Have you got a buyer for that property? And if you do, we'll make an arrangement where I co-op some information and some money back to you bringing your buyer to my listing. And then flip that. And then, Kimberly, you have a listing now and you say, that worked really well with Matthew. Hey, Matthew. And by the way, Rick, if either of you have somebody that suits this listing, if you bring a buyer to the table, I'll pay you. That was really the impetus, that agreement between brokers, that putting clientele together, product and purchaser together, was good for buyer and seller and good for broker and broker. That's really the impetus for MLS. And to me, really is the basis of everything we're doing with our collection of information. That's the database.
And I just want to expand on that a little bit. And I know this is very entry level for many of our listeners, and certainly, Matthew and Rick, but there are a lot of accusations about what an MLS is designed to do and what it isn't designed to do. And some people are really posturing in a way that, quite frankly, I'm offended by, but nobody asked me. But and instead of
they're afraid to ask you, Kimberly.
Yeah. But instead of me defending what I think this utility is, I'm going to just throw it out there for everybody to think about. If you don't think an MLS is helpful to the consumer, the people selling and the people buying, let's just look at a process of buying a car. There is nothing more frustrating than, let's say you want to buy a Honda, and this is not supported or endorsed by Honda in any way. But let's say you want to buy a Honda. You have to walk into 5 Honda dealerships to find the car you want because they don't cooperate with one another, which means my time is inefficiently used to find this car that I want. The Honda as a brand doesn't benefit from selling a car, which is their goal, but instead they're losing focus of let's sell the brand or let's sell the car. And instead they're focusing on who's getting paid to do that, meaning the individual dealerships. Now, again, please don't send me hate mail about how car dealers work. I'm just speaking as somebody who has, as many of us have, had to buy a car. We might want a certain model or a certain size or a certain color or certain features. And there is essentially no viable central database. There's a third party that might do it, but they don't do it very well. And the system isn't designed to be consumer friendly. They want to get you in the door. They want to sell you what their inventory is. We have essentially solved that problem in real estate with this cooperative collective database that allows not only the real estate agent to obviously make money, right? I mean, it helps us, but it primarily helps the buyer that wants to buy and the seller that wants to sell see everything that is out there. And the rest is kind of fine tuning. And we seem to have, at least I feel like we've lost sight of the benefit of an MLS.
It's interesting when you use a car dealership. I use a different example. If I walked into my favorite men's clothing store and there was Matthew, who was there to sell me something, and we looked at the various things, and he told me how good I look in this coat or that coat, or said that color didn't match. And then I said, I don't see anything in the store here that I want. But Matthew, I like you. So let's you and I go to the clothing store down the street, and you help me figure out what I look good in. And then I'm going to work with them to help get paid. That is not the retail model. That's the real estate model, where we find a representative that we like, take them with us, looking at the various pieces of inventory. But the retail world is all of that focused on just selling the product. And interestingly, when we look back to, let's say, 1992 as a cutoff date, that's the place at which we moved from a product-only side where everybody, listing broker and buyer broker, both represented the seller, paid for by the seller. And then in 1992, we said, no, buyers also deserve to have that representation. That in the consumer world, the buyer of a property has equal weight with the seller of a product. And if you think about that, that is truly the basis on which the real estate industry works. And quite frankly, we're not talking about a $40,000 car. We're talking about a $400,000 house. And so, as the world has shifted where representation is important, the real estate industry, in some ways, and to my chagrin, has said, you know what, we're okay if it's really just a product based system and buyers really don't bring great value to the table. I don't believe in that. And I believe that one of our challenges is the actual name, multiple listing service. It's about a list of product. And to me, in the long run, we have to get to that broker cooperative idea that you expressed there. In fact, MIBOR, which is in Indiana, calls itself a broker cooperative, a broker listing cooperative, where brokers around that listing cooperate with sellers and buyers to give representation to both. So it's an interesting place where we've gotten to. But guess what? Most people want to go to the Honda dealer. They want to put the key in the ignition. They want to turn it and have it turn on every single time. They want it to be easy. Now they want it in red, or they want it in gold, or they want it in silver, but they want that product to work every single time. And many times MLSs put themselves at a place of just making it convenient, as opposed to giving the consumer all the tools they need, both buyer and seller, to make a great decision on their behalf.
Yeah, I don't think any one of us feels comfortable walking into a dealership that we're being represented, because we're not. And I don't think, I've said to somebody, and it happened the last time I was in the car search. I said, we're really looking for this model within this model. It was a limited edition or whatever. And they're like, oh, yeah, that doesn't exist. You can't get that. It's 6 months or 6 weeks. You'd have to order it. We literally went to the next dealership in the next town over, and they had 3 on the lot. So, let us all, as we discuss the MLSs and reckon all your input, let us all be reminded that this cooperative is in the buyer and the seller's best interest. And if we flip this model to be what I see some are trying to direct it towards, this will harm the consumer, and it will limit their choices, and it will tie their hands in many cases. And I don't know anybody that likes the car buying experience. Don't get me wrong. There's a bunch of lovely car
Sure.
dealerships out there, but that is not how I would want to buy a house. I'd like to introduce our co-host, Matthew Rathbun.
I'm here making notes. So look, I love the car analogy to an extent. I do think that consumer behavior is a little different with the home buying. It's much more emotional. It's long term. It's a much bigger check that has to be written every month. But I think there are some things here that I'm going to tie these two things together. You mentioned Rick, 1992 is when we started this process of saying, the buyer is just as worthy of representation as the seller. And like my state, it didn't manifest until 1998, 1999. I think the Code of Ethics abrogated some of it. It was took 8 or 9 years to get to this point of, hey, the buyer deserves just as much representation as the seller does, but it took us 8-9 years to really get there from idea and concept to change of statute, again, in some of the states I'm licensed in. But I feel like we're going a little bit back in time now, because we, in 98, 99, when these changes manifested themselves, we still left the compensation alone, right? The seller still was carrying, for the most part, the burden of compensation. And then the NAR settlement comes about, and we go, okay, guys, you're going to have to talk to your buyers now, who will be ultimately responsible for paying you. And all of a sudden, all these agents are like, how do we get a buyer to pay? And what, we're not meeting them at the house anymore and just walking in a door without vetting them or giving them counsel. But sellers, we did all those things for. And now all of a sudden, from 1998 to 2024, into 2025, agents are now like, in concept, we believe the buyer had the right to equal preparation and consultation and representation, but we didn't start creating the resources and the assets and the tools and the skill sets to do that until we had to ask them to pay us. So it's been a long learning curve for all of this. And so now we get to, okay, we got to treat all these parties correctly. And I'm going to go back to your car analogy. I'm a CarMax guy. I know I'm paying more for the car than I would anywhere else, but they have a great website, a great app. I walk in, they leave me the hell alone and go, it's in the back and the doors are open. Go take a look for yourself. But the car experience to me is different than a house experience. I need someone to point out other issues with the car. Although I will admit that most car dealers do a better job promoting their cars online than we do houses. Better photos, 3D tours.
Cars had virtual tours before homes did.
Yeah. That's a whole different episode, Rick. We'll get there. But we're finding, and this wasn't really something I really tend to talk about, but I'm feeling passionate about this because you mentioned the books. I've made jokes in other episodes about the fact that we apparently are going back to the books at some companies. How do we continue in a world where data is so critically important? How do we continue to have arguments about the data being available to the buyer who in 1992 said they should be treated equally, that they deserve our best representation, yet we're going to hide listings from them in some aspects through, variations or contradictions to clear cooperation you've worked on. How do we continue to make the MLS an indispensable tool to real estate professionals when some of our own are trying to negate its value?
People who hide data, people who misrepresent data, time on market, what the price is, any price changes, when you hide that, that's essentially a fraud against the public. That's essentially a fraud. And so how will we manage that piece? I think we have to stand up for our core principles. One of the core principles of a multiple listing service is if you have a listing, Matthew, within the service area we've defined as an MLS, that goes into the MLS, available to all brokerages to see, bring their clientele to in a very short time frame, 24, 48, 72 hours, that it must be posted. And what has happened in time is people have manipulated that rule a bit because they want to sell it in-house versus not in-house. And when you have a system that then says, well, look, we're going to construct an entire hidden database shown only to buyers we like or who have signed up with us, and frankly, other agents that we like, but not everybody, it creates a fraud on the public. And if an MLS is going to survive, if MLS is going to survive as a mechanism, in my personal opinion, the only way we do that is to show everybody everything right from the get-go. So are there people in the world who need some privacy? Maybe they're having a family situation. Maybe they need not to expose it. Maybe somebody across the street shouldn't get to know. Okay, there is a mechanism for that. But we have weaponized that mechanism called Office Exclusive as a way to exclude other agents and, quite frankly, the consumers who choose to work with those agents from the process of being able to buy a house. And arguably, it isn't just that it hurts the buying consumer, it hurts the selling consumer. And how does it do that? Well, Matthew, Kimberly, thank you for inviting me to your home and to opportunity to list your house. And what I'd like to do, because I'm a really great broker, and Matthew said what my statistics was, I'm going to create a system in which I personally, or somebody in my office, is going to be the one that gets to sell your listing first before anybody else. And quite frankly, we have great agents in our office and we're really special. And so we're going to do a wonderful job of bringing you the right buyer to your listing. What's the challenge with that? Not every broker works with every consumer in the marketplace. And because consumers want that choice of who represents them, who meets their need, they'd like also to have access. And by the way, Matthew and Kimberly, they're willing to pay, I don't know, $100,000 more for your house than it might sell for within the confines of my private listing network. And so which is better for the consumer? And arguably, what will happen for MLSs in the long term and what you're seeing across a variety, whether realtor owned, whether broker owned, whether owned by independent investors, saying, look, we need access to the complete data. Because once we took the communication of a commission off the table, people ran around in small circles and screamed to the wind and said, it's the end of the world as we know it. And my argument there is you've been relying on the easy button. You show up with somebody in tow, run them through a house, push the easy button that says, here's the broker compensation on the buy side, and you expected to get paid, whether or not you met that client's needs effectively. Now that's gone. And hallelujah, in my mind, that it's gone, because what it says now is, Kimberly, Matthew, as your buyer representative, here are the kinds of things I'm going to do to take your interest to the wide marketplace. And when I have a private listing network, guess what? I have an AI bot. And that AI bot is really great because it's going to delve under the surface of all of the hidden messages and bring it forward, whether or not it's publicly available or not. So that other company is now going to have to spend a lot of time trying to hide its listings from an AI bot, further diminishing the reach of that listing for other sellers. But with me, Kimberly and Matthew, as your buyer's agent, I know those tools. I know how to go find them. And when I work with a reliable MLS that has all of the listing inventory for that marketplace, with the very few exceptions for those who need privacy over, perhaps they're a celebrity, perhaps they have a issue with a family relationship, perhaps they're not well and need it to be marketed in a limited way, I'm going to get you access to the broad base of the marketplace. And when you put those two ideas in tension with each other, that for a brokerage that creates a private network, sells it internal to its network to a special group of consumer buyers who they have signed up, what that does is say, fair housing in the United States, out the window. The opportunity to serve equally all clientele based on race, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, handicap, et cetera, that goes out the window. And what does that do to the fundamental basis of the American real estate system, which is private property ownership available to all who are qualified to buy? Throws it out the window as well. And by the way, that's 19% of the federal economy, of the gross domestic product of the United States. 19% is real estate. So when we start messing with these things, we mess not only with the needs of the individual buyer, the individual seller, but also with the economy as a whole, because it depends on an open, available marketplace.
This is my biggest reason to support the Clerk Corporation, and I've been very, very vocal about this one aspect, and that is the nature of homophily. We surround ourselves with people who look like us and go to church with us and are in the same economic thing. I last year took up golf, and all of a sudden I'm going to the golf club and realizing I had all these friends here all these years that I didn't know were golfers, and so now I identify as a golfer, and my friends were already there waiting for me to realize that we all will suck when we're on the golf course, but a couple of beers and it doesn't matter. And so when I build that database, if I have a listing and I'm like, dear seller, I'm going to make this house available to my sphere first. My sphere kind of is in the same economic. Now mine is more diverse than most. Anybody will be a friend, and I'll hang out with a lot of people. And I don't think that's always the norm for a lot of us. We tend to, again, be with people in our church group or nonprofit or whatever we are. So I'm only opening up to people who are in my mommy and me group or my church group or my nonprofit or whatever. It's alienating a significant portion of the culture who have a right, if they are capable of purchasing it, to have the same equal shot as the people in my sphere of influence. The people who don't live in my state, who are looking to move here and buy here and aren't in my sphere of influence, should have the same opportunity as everybody else who's qualified to find a home. And I think MLS is the only way that we guarantee that. that public distribution of listings and availability to agents for their clients is the only way to do that.
I want to add one thing if I can there. Not only is it the wide availability, the openness to everybody, but here's the other part. If we take a data set, and one of the pre-questions was, what do I think about the fact that data is everywhere? Well, it is everywhere. And most of the time it sucks everywhere. It's not great data. So when we artificially constrain portions of the market and put those in private networks, we're not talking about the whole of the real estate market. And we're not even talking accurately about the relationship between buyers and sellers in a marketplace. And so our challenge with it is that we artificially adjust metrics within the real estate data set. We eliminate part, we hide part of it. Instead of having an accurate overall flow, then what the challenge is, we've taken one of the 4 fundamental cores away from real estate data. 3 are timely, accurate, complete. Okay. Well, we're taking away the complete part. But to me, the 4th is meaningful. The data has to mean something. Otherwise, it's raw data. And so a lot of what MLSs are doing now, without the easy button of here's how you get paid, they begin to look and say, how do I leverage the real estate data that we have to create market intelligence, to create consumer intelligence about the real estate market? So if you now let's go back in time in the Wayback Machine. So I run into your office. It's 1985, and I run into one of the two of you, and you say, let's look at this black and white newsprint book of listings that are already 4 weeks old, excuse me. And so that's as accurate as it gets. So when I say, what's the market like, I am totally dependent upon the agents I'm talking to relay that accurately. Now move forward. If I've got a complete database, timely, accurate, and complete, and then I apply meaningful metrics to it. Why is this corner more expensive than the corner, kitty corner from it? Because it has to do with zoning, it has to do with use and capability. If I create that only for agents, then again, you have to come to me because I'm the source of all knowledge. But what MLS has done through wide distribution of that information has made that available to the consumer. And that doesn't cut the real estate agent out of the deal. It simply requires that real estate agent to step up their game, to be the interpreter of market knowledge, to be the explainer of market knowledge, both for sellers and buyers. But what does it take? Accurate, complete, timely, and meaningful data. And we're going to cut out a couple of those because we can all look and see what's available. Okay, that's one of the core principles of MLS. What's available? What is that property relative to all the other properties that gets to price and terms and conditions and so on that I need to understand as a consumer? If what I say is, the only way for me to go and find that is to go to a particular office with a private network who has only that listing information, am I really getting a broad sense of the whole marketplace, either as a seller or as a buyer? And my argument is we are absolutely not getting that.
Yeah, the fact that in whatever year we're in, 2025, that we're actually having this discussion is shocking to me. And, I want to underscore a couple of things that you've said, but I'm just going to say them and probably be in much more crass of a fashion. This limits people's choices. And I know it's being passed across on as that to not allow something is limiting choices. Let's just talk about it. No seller ever told me in my 27 years of experience, please limit the audience of people that can come see my house. No one has ever said that. And if they have, they've likely been doing it in a fair housing violation type of way, but we don't take those listings. We don't service those listings. We obviously, we're not involved in that type of limiting of choice. But the general public wants the largest. brokerages, they're looking at names, reputations. They like the brand because they want the largest audience to see their home. If you're limiting your audience, number two, then you're limiting your price or your opportunity for the best price, terms, and conditions. No seller has ever said, limit my choice about price, options, conditions. And so, number three, if you were to follow this mindset of allowing a brokerage to have their own little list, and I mean little, relatively speaking, to the entire MLS, I don't care what brokerage it is, you're not going to have as much of a database of available buyers and available properties as an individual brokerage, whether you're the biggest brokerage in the world or not. The MLS collectively is going to outdo that, whatever the numbers are. So who is this benefiting then? It's benefiting only a brokerage if a property is sold in-house in most business models. So that brings us to the next thing. It's limiting your audience, limiting the seller's price, terms, and conditions. It's only benefiting the person telling you to do it or the brokerage. It's eroding the database of information, as you've already touched upon, which then in future sales or in another discipline that needs that data. We have assessors that use MLS data, town municipalities, appraisers that are helping banks make investments use this data. Now, yes, they can go to public record data, but that's like, again, trying to find a house on your own. I mean, trying to find a car on your own when it could be much easier, more efficient, and exact when you have a database of this is a room, this is the size or the style of a house. Most public record databases do not contain anywhere, not even a tenth of what an MLS was. So now we have a utility that isn't able to service other industries. And last but not least, any safety issues that come under this disguise of, oh, you want us to sell it privately or discreetly. We have, like you said, we have a mechanism for that. I can think of two scenarios. One, you're a celebrity and you don't want the inside of your home smeared all over the internet or to the general population for the star thing. Well, you know what? Most celebrities don't sell their homes while they live in them. So that's not really happening, right? And or you're maybe a victim of some type of domestic violence, or you're concerned for your own safety. I get that, and I would completely support that choice of that seller to keep their home out of an MLS as long as they understood what the risks were. But again, there's a mechanism for that in most MLSs. But here's the rub for me. If you are a celebrity and you don't want the inside of your property smeared all over the internet, or you are a victim of some type of safety related concern, if either of those apply, then you're not the agent who has taken photos and you're blasting it all over social media anyways. So either you have a privacy real legitimate concern or you don't. But you don't claim to have one and then, vomit these photos. In one vein, you're telling your seller, oh, this could be a safety issue. You don't want this all over the internet. But then you're putting all the photos all over the internet. So at the end of all of this, here's how I'm going to summarize, because none of this makes sense to me. The seller should always have a choice. But I'm guessing that any brokerage that is adopting this mindset, that this private, offline, limiting choices type of scenario for a seller will completely reverse their position once this is no longer a seller's market and it becomes a more balanced market, because they won't be able to do their job without an MLS.
So I think it's important. There's opportunity for lots of different business models, so long as they are lawful and they are not harming the consumer. And I think most of these MLSs, Rick, you'll have to tell me, you have such a broader experience than this. Most MLSs have a mechanism for that select 1 to 2% who can't or don't want to be online to be put there. I think for me, it's the intentionally going to a seller with a straight face and saying, this is good for you. And recently I was on this tirade on Facebook and made this comment. Somebody says, I disagree. I just recently got a buyer to pay a premium to get to make sure that they bought the house without it going to open market, and that was good for the buyer and seller. Well, by the very argument this individual made, the buyer paid a premium for fear that the seller would realize other better offers if they went on the full market. So again, the statement itself verified my argument, not his, that this was not good for the seller. He believes that the seller won because they got over asking. It didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And, I want to focus on one word that Kimberly said: choice. Choice requires knowledge. If for me to make an informed choice, I have to have all of the information. So if I say, Kimberly, pick a number between 1 and 10, so you can pick 3, 7, or 9, right? That's not all the numbers between 1 and 10. That's only 3 that I've said you can choose among. So is that choice or is that not? So you get to choose to have a limited market, because I'm going to show you the kinds of things that I will do to enhance it for those other people. But push comes to shove, and a recent story highlights it perfectly. Seller gets into a deal in a private network situation, gets an acceptance. Part of the way through, as many deals do, it fell, went to the MLS on the open marketplace, promptly had multiple offers, achieved a sale price $100,000 higher than they were at in the private market, because they had broad exposure. They had an openness of choice. So to me, the idea of choice requires full knowledge of the implications of your choice. So I'd love to hide how many days on market there are. I'd love to hide any price adjustments. That's in your best interest, seller, if I do it in that way. And ultimately, it may in fact enhance a seller to misrepresent the terms under which they're selling their house. But what that does to the consumer is try to create this false sense of newness, this false sense of this is exactly the right price, that in fact, if you tested it on the open marketplace with all of the buyers coming to the table, you may well have achieved much more than that $100,000 difference. So, ultimately, choice takes knowledge. And if MLS is going to be the source of accurate, timely, complete, meaningful data, if it's going to be that, then it has to do some new stuff. And one of the pieces that you had suggested I might visit was the idea of artificial intelligence and how MLSs can use that more effectively. So if there's a product out that does image recognition, and there are a number of them, but what they do with that image recognition is a couple of things. They can increase the compliance about numbers of bedrooms, numbers of baths, but take them on a recent study that was done for the appraisal marketplace. In the appraisal marketplace, they discovered in the 80-something percentile that a listing was either average or above average. Okay. This photo recognition software can look at the actual image and help that appraisal to get to really what the true condition is. So because we post lots and lots of photos of things, we get to say, is that Formica counters? Is that solid surface counters? Is that hardwood floor? Is that 70s shag carpet? And by measuring those using artificial intelligence, come to a much clearer sense of what you actually have to sell. And so many MLSs, in trying to get to that meaningful data, are applying artificial intelligence tools. So how to be able to scan through what your consumer is looking at when you've given them a portal of kinds of listings they might be interested in, the ones where they spend the most time, and then marry that with other similar properties that have similar image features, might make that more effective for an agent to be able to use artificial intelligence to identify the kinds of properties that consumers looking at, not just square footage and bedroom, bath, and size of the lot, but many of the more salient features about finishes, quality, room sizes, etc. And Europe and much of the world, in fact, when you look at any listing online, it automatically includes a floor plan. And unfortunately, one partly through lawsuits, but also because of varying ways that we measure homes, lots of listings in the United States MLSs don't have a floor plan. That combination of what the images are plus the dimensionality of the house make for a much more informed consumer. And there are AI based tools that are doing exactly that for the MLS. And those MLSs who are forward looking are, in fact, looking for ways to add value to the raw data they collect and normalize and create compliance around, so that out of that you can create true market intelligence and then marry that with intelligence about consumers and consumer behavior to give agents the tools to identify for a seller what things I might fix up, what kinds of things I might enhance, what I can advertise with, marketing remarks that focus on the kinds of things consumers are looking for. And then on the buy side, so that I'm not looking at houses that really truly are not what I'm after, a waste of their time, a waste of an agent's time, but instead really marry what they're looking for with what the availability is in a way that can happen more quickly, more thoroughly, and less dependent upon opinion, as you said at the very beginning, Kimberly, more dependent on fact.
It occurred to me that there's a tool that I've used recently, and this just goes to the point of what an MLS can do that I might not have been able to do. Is, you have a property, it's maybe not having sold as quickly as you would have liked to, and the seller says, well, what do you think about a price change or a price adjustment or a price correction? You can go in and hypothetically put in that new price and see how much bigger your buying audience would be. I mean, these are tools that directly benefit the client, in this case the seller client. Why are we thinking, I mean, is there an overall opinion with AI and big data and all this stuff? I mean, where do we think the next generation will head? We've started there. I mean, where could we go with this?
Well, to me, somebody put this recently. I'm on NAR's strategic planning committee this year, and somebody had said AI will never replace agents. And my response to that is AI will never replace really skilled agents. Yeah. But if you're an average agent doing average stuff, you're going to get replaced. So why is that? Because it tries to mirror those repetitive behaviors that we call our entire job, instead of saying our real job is as a negotiator, as an understanding of market knowledge, of creating intelligence for the consumer to make good decisions. So if we're going to do an average job, absolutely, AI is going to replace us. And so what does an MLS do to help those subscribers to an MLS have greater tool set? It applies AI tools to visuals, to pictures, to understanding market intelligence about buyers, buyer predictability and where they go, seller predictability and who's likely to sell, so that those of us who remain in the business dependent upon a tool to raise the level of our capability, not to be our entire capability, which is how some think, but rather to raise the level of our capability so that we can be survivors and do a great job. We're already at a place where we have an 80-20, or as many say, a 90-10 marketplace anyway. 90% of the business is done by 10% of the agents. Why is that? Because they invest in the kind of tools through their MLS, through their brokerages, that allow them to create order and competency on repetitive behavior, and then focus their skill set on higher levels of behavior, negotiation skills, marketing skills with understanding where's the right place for that listing or that one. Or as you suggest, let's do a predictive model about what pricing adjustment might do for those looking in a whole marketplace. Well, what does that take? That takes an MLS being able to identify not just how many doors were opened by a lockbox, but which doors were opened on which lockboxes and in what neighborhood, because that tells you what is a buyer range of this particular house, how many showings to a sale on that house, how many showings to a sale on that house. But that takes more aggregation of that data. With that, then we can say, if I made an adjustment to here, how many additional buyers might come to the table for that? Or in that price range, how does my house then stand up to others in that price range relative to features, finishes, condition, etc.? So to me, it is simply recognizing that with data comes the requirement to interpret data. And AI can be a great tool for doing that. It can also be a lazy man's tool for doing that. So do we want to do it to raise our capability or be the entirety of our capability? That, I think, is the big difference.
It's funny. I have been reticent for my entire instructing career of almost 2 decades now. I think it's 19 years I just hit, maybe actually a little longer than that. But I've always been careful to not say technology is going to replace an agent, but AI has changed my mind. And that agent who raises her hand and said, AI will never replace us is somewhat accurate. Agents with AI will outpace agents without. That is just that marriage of the alchemy of AI and technology and the humanity and creativity of an agent will be the winning factor. And I feel like, and I'm leading up to a question here, I promise. um, I'm looking at tools like RESB.ai, which is a MLS only. You can't get it as an agent, MLS gets it. And they do some of what you said. They tag certain features in the house. They give it a description that Google, for the moment, Google being the king of search, AI will replace that in the next year or two. But for the moment, when somebody searches a house with whatever, the description of the photo may be a key indicator of why or how that house gets in the response. And as agents are not sitting here learning how to write good SEO, they're not worried about the new ever-changing algorithms of Google. AI does that part of that brain for me. And so if I have an MLS with Recipe.ai built in as part of my MLS fees, and it's going to tag the pictures, it's not just about marketing, it's also going to help the sight impaired home buyer identify what's in the photo at a level that agents have completely ignored and not been forced to do that or know how to tag those photos. And so I'm looking at the AI tool being this great enhancer to make homes more available to sight impaired viewers or other types of people who are in need, as well as take the work off the agent's shoulder to tag 65 photos. I still have an obligation to go check the AI generated content because it may not be accurate. And as we've talked about in other episodes, I'm still liable for what it does. But if I had a choice, so let's lead into MLS choice here. If I had a choice between two MLSs, one just slightly more expensive, but it had something like Recipe AI or another toolkit in, or one that was just a great broker to broker and consumer aggregate for marketing, I'm going to choose the other one. And I feel like we're getting, Rick, you can tell me I'm completely wrong here. We're getting very close to nudging towards a line where MLSs are going to start competing for our dollar as opposed to just being regionalized if they can, because it's just now in the wake of NAR settlement, it's a database. How good the database is and how good they are marketing and how easy they make me an agent is going to be where I put my money. And all they have to do is add every county in my state, and now I have choice. So can you talk a little bit about what is the future of MLS, knowing that if, and I hate to say this, and you could send me the hate mail. This is not Kimberly or Rick's fault. But what happens when outside companies start saying, you know what, MLS isn't keeping up with it. Here's our toolkit of applications and resources. Just give us your money. Just put your listings in here for a national database. Like, how do we evolve from where we are to embrace these tools and be competitive in this model?
So, great question, and one that every single MLS executive across the country is dealing with right at this moment. Depending upon your brokerage model, depending upon your MLS model, you can have a statewide database relatively quickly. Does that mean that you're going to drive 400 miles in my state in order to list something in Joseph, Oregon, which is up in the northeast corner? No, I'm never going to do that. But if that's included in my overall marketplace, that makes it much easier for me to make a referral to somebody wisely there, or to give my client some information about who to be talking to about it. The idea that what the future of MLS will be, and here's maybe a couple of words: fewer, bigger, more financially capable. Fewer, bigger, more financially capable. Why do I say that? Because MLS is oftentimes about scale. And what I mean is, do you have enough subscriber base to buy at the level of which you can be competitive? You can buy all the tools that there are and apply them to your smaller MLS system. But it would be wildly expensive to do that. So as you get larger with a larger number of subscribers, that gives you the scale to buy different kinds of products and implement them at scale, at a way that is manageable. For a long time, though, in contradiction to what you had said, MLSs were on the drive of, am I cheaper? Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think now with the introduction of AI or the implementation of AI broadly, it's not just, am I the cheapest at the table, but am I the most productive at the table? And am I willing to pay, arguably an expensive Starbucks coffee a month more to have a tool that gives me something that actually turns to a transaction? Absolutely, I'm willing to do it. But what does that take of the MLS? You can't just have the tools. You have to sell the tools. You have to train the tools. So you can, as some MLSs do, load up. I've got 400 different products you can use. Wonderful. I can't use 400 products. What I can use is 12 or 10. And what I want an MLS to do is to be the concierge of knowledge. I want them to sort out the best photo recognition software. I want them to get me the best floor plan system, to help me do marketing with, to raise my hidden SEO, because I don't know what that means and I can't keep up with that. I just as soon have somebody do that for me. Why would I pay $10 or $12 or $15 a month more for that? Because if that turns into one deal a year, this is the challenge that we look at. Oh my gosh, you raised my MLS dues by $5. It's the end of the world. That is the underbelly of unperforming people talking mostly, because top producers look at that and go, I see the money. I see the turn on investment. It makes perfect sense to me. Now, what does that bode for an MLS? Well, if you're smaller and you don't have the horsepower by yourself, it doesn't mean give up. What it means is find partnerships. So it can be done simply by aggregating into one company, or in my own MLS, we aggregate 3 MLSs together. We buy at scale. We have a similar set. We have the same set of rules and processes. We have the same database. But what we do then is buy at a number that's bigger than any of the 3 of us and get a better rate. And then we wholesale back to the individual MLSs. They get a local face that they're used to, but we do scale on the back end. And the value of that is we've added a number of different proper tools to the system. We've added a higher end analytics tool, Domus Analytics, which I like very much. We've gone out to find a data checking platform that actually makes it more effective for our compliance officer to pop those listings that have some challenge and look at just those, rather than being simply a complaint driven system. We're looking at programs that look out on the internet and say, you know what, I think your listing is being scammed and turned into a rental. So let me identify that for you, put it out to you, let you verify that's the case. And not you, but me, this company, will go out to Google, to or go to Craigslist, et cetera, and say, you know what, that's an illegal listing, that's inappropriate, take it down. Not only do they identify it for you, but they negotiate the removal of that. And if any of you have ever tried to get a Facebook listing post down and try to talk to Facebook, you don't have the horsepower. So why not work with a company that can do that? Well, those are the kinds of things that bring the scale. There are very large MLSs. There are two that are over 100,000, but there are very, very good MLSs in the 20 to 30,000. There are great MLSs at the 10,000, at the 5,000, but mostly because they've found partnerships. And because of, what we learned in COVID is you can work from anywhere. So why don't I be a technology officer for two MLSs at the same time, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast? My skill set is perfect. I can work remotely. And if you look at large MLSs, they have a lot of remote employees for that exact reason. So I don't have to live, for example, I don't have to live in Fort Lauderdale to do work where I might be doing better with that in my little home in Missouri, where I'm happy to be. And that is the reason that I think bigger is happening, but not always because of an individual MLS, but they aggregate numbers together to get those tool sets that they need. And then they can buy and leverage the AI tools we're talking about.
Yeah. Rick, thank you so much for spending this hour with us, sharing some of your, also thank you for all of your leadership for so many years, and your looking at the vision in the future, making this happen. It's such a critical part of what we do as agents and who we are and what the future is data, data, data. So these are core things. We have talked for many, many hours about all these things as instructors and leaders in our associations. But this was great. This is awesome content. I really appreciate it. We're gonna go ahead and send ourselves out here, and so we always do, Rick. First, we want to know, how do we get in touch with you? You do consulting for brokerages and associations, and specifically for MLSs, which is a very niche type of consulting. So how do they get a hold of you? And we always ask for our guests to share at least one tool or app that you use on a regular basis that helps you out.
So cell phone 541-951-2323, email rharris, RHARRIS, @mind, MIND.net. That's how you get in touch with me, and you'll get me all the time there. You're going to think this is really frumpy, but this is actually the truth. So I was thinking about this question of which app do I use all the time? And the worst part about it is it's Audible. I listen all the time. I listen to books on tape. I listen to podcasts on tape. Because to me, it's I can listen while I'm driving or while I'm flying or some of the other things. But the real value to me is that not only does it say what you might like, but it opens up that possibility of things I hadn't thought about looking at or thought about reading or thought about. And so, and because of that, I figured out that I can listen and absorb quite a lot on a regular basis using that tool. And I do. And it's $14.95 a month. There you go.
All right. I don't think that's frumpy at all, because probably in the top 5 of my use apps all the time is Audible. I think it's a great resource, a great tool, and especially as people who are learning. I also appreciate you giving your cell phone number out. So if there are any bots listening, he is always looking for good costing healthcare for real estate professionals from insurance providers who work with whomever. Rick, thanks again. Kimberly, what's your favorite app or tool for this episode?
Oh, I don't know. I'm feeling like we have, this is a tone of responsibility today. So and eliminating risk, and risk is all about safety, and safety means, you've got to have some type of, app on your phone that helps you with safety. Forewarn, obviously, if you go to nar.realtor/safety, there's a whole bunch of resources there, but with very little information, it can give you some basic information on whether or not the person that's calling you or the person that may be asking to meet you has some nefarious intent. Don't rely on it 100% to give you a false sense of safety, but you got to have something. And if you're a broker listening, might be a good tool to offer your agents if you're looking to stay competitive in the industry and offer tools. As you know, Rick just gave us a bunch of tools to keep MLSs competitive. And I do know some MLSs actually do incorporate some safety tools as well. So check your MLS, have something to help yourself stay safe.
I'll add one little caveat to that. If you're going to use for one client, use them for every single person that you encounter, and be consistent in your care, and make sure you're looking up and doing business practice consistently for every single person. Okay, I have two apps here. One is Resby.ai, which I mentioned earlier. It's not an app, and it's only, as I last heard, was only available to MLSs to incorporate, but one of the 6 MLSs I'm a member of has it. I love this tool for all the reasons I announced earlier. And another one is not a real estate app, but I also mentioned I took up golf recently. 18 Birdies has been my favorite app. It recommends which club to use. It gives me distance. I keep my score on my phone. It's, super, super great. It's got a subscription fee, and I get that. But if you're a golfer, you're probably not unaccustomed.
I took a class from you long ago about apps that you like, and I still remember Candy Crush was high on your list. So I just want you to remember that. I've heard that from you.
And that concludes today's show.
Yeah. All right, guys. As always, thank you for listening, hanging out with us. Please do subscribe and like. It helps us out. And with that, we are done. The Meet the Moment podcast is a production of the Real Estate Business Institute, an affiliate of the National Association of Realtors. Special thanks to CEO Jenny Scheib and to Dan Shea, our editor and content producer. The views and ideas expressed in this podcast are not necessarily shared or endorsed by RVI. All recommendations made in this episode were merely provided as best practices. The practices of any realtor are subject to the Realtor Code of Ethics, the laws and licensing jurisdiction, broker policies, and competent legal advice. Visit www.rebinstitute.com for more information, resources, education, and upcoming events.